It's really interesting, the origins of the abortion industry. It's actually very dark. So the first wave of feminists, people like Elizabeth Nichols, Susan B. Anthony, they were staunchly pro-life because they realised it would be so damaging to women to have abortion. So first generation who got women the right to vote, to stand in parliament, they were all pro-life. What happened in the 1950s and 60s is that the feminist movement became captured by the abortion industry. And what we can see is that the founders of Big Abortion, they had a really sinister agenda. So Margaret Sanger, who's the founder of Planned Parenthood, she wanted abortion to deal with the Negro population. Those are her words. She wanted abortion clinics in black neighbourhoods to kill black babies because she wanted to get rid of the racially diseased.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's the founder of Planned Parenthood.
That's the founder of the biggest abortion corporation in the world.
And how much money are they getting every year?
Oh, look,
it'd be billions.
Yeah, it would be. And I don't know the exact number, but it's billions of dollars. And then the other founder of Big Abortion, also at this time, was Marie Stopes in a different part of the world, in the UK and in Europe. And she wanted abortion to deal with the hopelessly rotten. She wanted it to rid the society of the worst people who were disabled.
Whoa.
Yeah. So she famously had a child marry someone who was blind, and she just cut them out of her will because she said, you know, how could you marry someone so diseased? I don't want to have them. I don't want to know their children. I don't want their offspring. So the two founders of the biggest abortion businesses in the world, Margaret Sanger and Marie Stopes, were racist, sexist, ableist eugenicists.
And by the sounds of it, some kind of eugenic Darwinian aspect to this, where it's kind of like we want the Übermensch, like the Germans were trying to create this like ultimate breed of Wow, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, the Nazis were really into abortion.
Really?
Yeah, they wanted to create the ideal person. They experimented on fetuses. There was all of this eugenicist attitude in what they were doing, and in terms of creating the ideal, you know, person.
Okay.
And so this is the dark underbelly that people just don't know. And Planned Parenthood has sort of scrubbed Margaret Sanger from their website. Marie Stopes has rebranded as MSI International because, you know, in this era of, you know, where the scholarship that I was on, the Rhodes Scholarship, has been really tainted by the founder, by Cecil Rhodes and some of his dealings and businesses in slavery, you know. But these big abortion providers, they want to just carry on the legacy of their founders, but without any of the scrutiny about what it's really about.
Yeah. Okay. So, when do you think the ideological movement? Where do you think the axe is turned from this being clearly a sort of racist, sexist, eugenics, sort of even Nazi-based medical experimentation? At what point did it go from that into being this sort of flowery social justice fight for, you know, women and their rights? At what point did the branding change?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that it was around the 1970s with Roe v. Wade. So what we see happening in the 50s and 60s is this push for abortion. Then you get a Supreme Court decision which says you can't have limits on abortion. And then that gets rolled out in the different states in different ways. But you see this abortion rights movement emerge in the 80s, and you see it 100% aligned with this feminist agenda. So, you know, if you think about the 80s and 90s and the power suits, the women taking over the world, the women, you know, talking back to the men and the patriarchy that's oppressed them, and abortion became just a fundamental tenet of that approach. And it was almost like you were anti-woman if you didn't sign up to that. And so then it became really hard to argue about the rights of the child in utero or to argue that there had to be a better way for women because, you know, the media, the universities, the corporates and government, all of this gets captured. And politically, a really powerful force develops through Emily's List. Most people worldwide have no idea of the name of this organisation, and yet it's been so powerful to pushing a pro-abortion agenda in the government. And in Australia, Emily's List was created in 1996. In America, it was in the 1980s. The sole goal of Emily's List is to get pro-abortion women into the Democrats in the US or the Labor Party in Australia. And they have been so tremendously successful, and they've combined it with quotas. So the Australian Labor Party not only has this relationship with Emily's List within it, but they've successfully argued that, 40% of the people in the parliament need to be women. And so that means that 40% of the people in the parliament are typically pro-abortion women who have come up through Emily's List. And that's why Australia has abortion up to birth for any reason in every state or territory, even though the people would not be as extreme as the parliament.
That's insane. Like, that's such a clear example of conflict of interest and a bias that then gets perpetuated into governance.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the Democrats back in the day, there were a lot of Catholics in there. It was not staunchly, aggressively pro-abortion, and yet Kamala was the most pro-abortion candidate we've ever seen for the Democrats. Similarly, in Australia, the Albanese federal government has been the most pro-abortion government we've ever seen. There's literally, Ali, and most people will be shocked to hear this, a late-term abortion payment. So under Australian law, if you have a stillborn baby, you're entitled to about $4,500 from the government, which will just help tide you over in that period dealing with the grief. But the way the Albanese government has structured this is if you have a stillborn baby deliberately, like if you've deliberately killed your child through the injection of poison and delivered them stillborn, you can still get that $4,500. It's a late-term abortion payment that has happened under this government's watch.
So hold on. So effectively, you could run a business as a woman if you want to just get pregnant every 9 months, and then or 20 weeks or whatever, and just keep aborting them, and then you'll get $4,500, whatever you just said it was.
The stillborn parenting payment applies to late-term abortion. You're going to get so much hate for just saying that, but the reality is there's actually there's precedent for this. The Howard government had something called the baby bonus. It gave women $5,000 for having babies. Peter Costello, the treasurer at the time, famously said, have one baby for mum, one for dad, and one for the country, because we had this declining birth rate.
Right.
And women were getting pregnant to get the baby bonus of $5,000. You don't even need to do that now. You can get pregnant for 20 weeks. Kill your baby via a late-term abortion at 21 weeks, and you'll get $4,500. So it's much more lucrative.
No. How is that happening in Australia?
And
That's insane.
how is no one talking about it? I have exposed this, and I've worked with a few journalists. So I went on Sky and I did an interview. I put it on my socials. I managed to get a front page on the Advertiser in Adelaide, $4,500 for a dead baby. So I did get a front page article, but there's radio silence.
And also there's a worry that by talking about this, you're almost promoting it.
Yeah, well, I was worried about that.
Yeah.
That people actually got angry at me and said, you should not be talking about this because it's going to lead to more babies being killed.
Because this is the thing. You're a parent, I'm a parent. It's difficult, and there are challenges. And there's as far as I'm aware, basically no incentives to have children. There's no, in terms of from the state.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you get a little bit of help with daycare and stuff like that, but we ought to be incentivizing the creation of families. It's the foundation of the country. It's the foundation of the state. Now, the idea that you're not doing that, but you're instead giving money to parents who are killing their babies, this is unprecedented in the history of civilization. Who does that?
It's absolutely insane, and it's got through because of behind-the-scenes lobbying of pro-abortion activists. So it's only through reading the fine print on the government website and then asking strategic questions that I've uncovered the fact that if you have a late-term abortion, deliberately kill your child and deliver them stillborn, you can get $4,500 from the federal government for doing so.